Well, you don't need to look into the future to realize that this album is going to fit nicely in the discography of this band. Let's dive into it. Clairvoyant by the Contortionist. So, the Contortionist is a U.S. Now, they labeled themselves as a deathcore band, but I really think that they're more of a melodic metal band at this point. They don't have to rely on screaming their balls off or blowing out the doors with some kind of a death beats. They're much more melodic and they're much more atmospheric in their presentation of music. They really got their start in 2010 with Exoplanet. They followed it up 2 years later with Intrinsic. And then 2 years after that, they put out their landmark album of Language. And many people believe that Language really put them on center stage within this type of metal. And I have to admit right off the get-go, I'm not actually that big of a fan of the Contortionist. I understand their fan base and I know why they're so popular. These guys have got talent coming out of their yin-yang. They exude passion and put a new spin on this type of metal. But for me, it doesn't really resonate as much as it does with other people. Now, Language is the only album that I am familiar with the band, so I don't really know of the previous two albums, their first two albums. Coming out of the gates, this is probably, in my opinion, their strongest work and my favorite work. And this was even coming into the album knowing some of the singles off of this album. I really, really liked Returning to Earth. I felt like this song provided a much needed contrast within their playing styles. It sets up very beautifully with that guitar work, and it really takes its time to lay down the foundation of the song. And because of that, once we get into the more heavy aspects of this song, it pays off a little bit more because we have that foundation on there. The harmonizations that we have within the vocals is just to die for. This is something that metal hasn't really utilized all that much. I feel like metal, especially within more of the technical metal, is much more focused on the brutality of the vocals instead of the harmonizations. The Contortionist has really set the stage on what the vocals can do, and Return to Earth really shows this magnificently. The other single that these guys released early on in the promotion of this album was Reimagined, and this one I didn't connect with quite as much, but I did like the fact that these guys are laying down that foundation of the song really, really well with the really soothing guitar work. It's almost reminding me of almost like a trance music within this. Like, it's so melodic and so flowing through. Like, it's almost like a math rock at certain times within that. Like, the rhythm section is very heavily led by those higher up guitars. They're not falling back on the gent style of metal. They're letting that harmonization be the runner of the song. But probably my favorite song off of this album is the seventh song of Relapse. I love the use of, I think it's a synthesizer. It's very akin to again, more of like that post-rock or that math rock, almost to the sense of like a Tangerine Dream, of just being that dreamy landscape, utilizing a little bit more of that synthesized noise almost. And it really, again, I know I keep going back to this, but it sets that foundation of the song so well. Left much faster than it crept to me. The only drawback that I have is once that intro kind of gets skirted to the side and we get into the main crux of the song, I'm not as excited for it because it feels like a lot of the territory we've already tread with the past songs. Now, the rest of the songs are still good, but they don't leave that lasting impact as, say, Return to Earth or Relapse do. And I do like the fact that both Relapse and Return to Earth are at the end of the album, so I have something to look forward to when I'm listening to this guy. I'm not a big fan of front-heavy albums. I much prefer a back-heavy album because, as I said, it gives me something to look forward to at the end of the album. But Godspeed and Reimagined and Clairvoyant, they give me enough that I don't want to skip them, but I'm not also, looking forward to them upon re-listens. And I also love the fact that the album opens and closes with monochrome. It opens up with passive and it ends with pensive. And I think they close it off with one of the stronger tracks on this album with the pensive. It definitely has a really great play out. It's the longest track, and because of that, they allow themselves to stretch their legs a little bit, because they constrain themselves a little bit with the shorter runtime, especially with the beginning 3 tracks of, I think the longest one, just under 5 minutes. With the closing track of being over 9, again, it lets them breathe a little bit. It lets them stretch their legs and try different things, which is very important for this style of music because it's so atmospheric, it's so rhythmic in that it lets you get down in almost like a trance, and it almost allows you to drift off a little bit more. And so I love the fact that they ended it with one of the stronger pieces. So overall, I did enjoy this album, and it was a surprise coming off of Language. As I said, I wasn't a big fan of Language. Not to say that I didn't enjoy it, I'm just saying that I'm not as excited for this type of music. But I was pleasantly surprised with this guy. I wasn't dragging my feet while listening to it. I was really getting into it and getting absorbed in the atmosphere of this album. Overall, this is one that you will want to download. If you're a fan of the band, I think you'll be very, very rewarded with this album. If you're not a fan of this band and you've never really approached them, this is actually a very good starting point to get enveloped in this type of music. So, that's my take. What did you guys think? If you're a fan of the band, how does it stack up with their past discography? If you aren't a fan, give it a listen to, and let me know of your own comments by commenting down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.